A covert fallout bunker is constructed beneath the backyard of Dr. Calvin Weber, an eccentric American scientist who believes that nuclear war with the Soviet Union is about to break out in 1962. Fearful of a nuclear exchange with Cuba, Calvin brings his expectant spouse Helen into the shelter. As an F-86 Sabre crashes into the home above due to an unanticipated mechanical breakdown, Calvin fears the worst and sets the shelter's time locks for 35 years. The Webers' property is abandoned and their neighbors and officials believe they were killed because the crash totally wrecked their house. Adam, Helen's child, is raised on pop hits by Perry Como and Dean Martin as well as hits from the 1950s, such as I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners. His father raises him to a high standard and he learns multiple languages. In 1965, a diner above ground opens, and Melker, a young local, works there as a soda jerk for the first time. As the suburban neighborhood degenerates into an inner-city ghetto over the years, the diner is sold and converted into a pizzeria. Later, it becomes a punk club called Purgatory. By 1995, Melker has become a bitter, middle-aged drinker who lives in the demolished remnants of the club. Calvin believes the family must remain underground after the shelter unlocks in 1997, mistaking the abandoned neighborhood for a post-apocalyptic wasteland populated by irradiated mutants despite Helen's protests. Helen, in contrast to Calvin, who relishes the seclusion, and Adam, who knows nothing else, has never adapted to living in the shelter. Adam is the first person to leave the shelter in order to get food as supplies are running low and Calvin is becoming sick. Melker, who had seen Calvin the night before, appears to him, bursting through the floor in his radiation suit. Adam becomes a god in the old man's mind. Adam buys supplies while marveling at the outside world, but he then loses track of how to go back to the elevator. When Adam goes to a hobby shop to try to sell his father's vintage baseball cards, he meets Eve Rustikoff, who exposes the store owner's dishonesty and gets fired. In exchange for a rare card, Eve drives Adam to a Holiday Inn, but she returns the following morning out of guilt. Adam begs her for assistance. Adam, not understanding the value of money, grants her request for $1,000 a week and asks Eve to assist him in finding a Pasadena, California-born bride, following his mother's recommendation. Adam meets Troy, Eve's best friend and gay roommate, who gives him style tips and a makeover. To help Adam find a wife, Eve and Troy accompany him to a swinging nightclub from the 1940s. Several women are drawn to Adam, including Eve's adversary Sophie. Eve, who is envious, gets back in touch with her ex-boyfriend Cliff and convinces him to have a fight with Adam. Eve eventually gives in when Adam shows off his boxing prowess, having trained daily with his father. Eve returns home, humiliated. Afterwards, Troy informs her that Adam and Sophie departed the club. Adam reappears and explains that all he could think about was Eve, so he graciously declines Sophie's advances. Eve gives him a kiss, but begs him to go after he confesses the truth about his history and his intention to marry her underground. Adam travels to Eve's home after discovering the club, where Melker has gathered a sizable following to adore him. There, she is waiting to have him committed alongside psychiatrist Dr. Nina Aaron and her assistant. Adam cooperates at first and manages to get away, but not before asking Eve and Troy to gather his belongings and settle his hotel payment. Troy and Eve discover 1960s clothing and toiletries in his hotel room, along with incredibly rich stock certificates from businesses like IBM, which Calvin had previously written off as worthless. Based on this evidence, they conclude that Adam is not insane and has been speaking the truth the entire time. Calvin gets ready to reseal his family within the shelter while Melker and his sect load supplies inside. Adam is seen by Eve outside the club. After giving each other a hug, Adam shows her his parents. Calvin and Helen, taken aback by Eve, decide to lock up the shelter for a period of 2 months while Adam and Eve make plans. Adam and Eve sell the stocks at this period in order to buy and restore a red 1960 Cadillac convertible and to construct his parents a new, identical home in the country to the one that was destroyed. After persuading Melker that Adam is not God, they assist him in transforming the bar into a nightclub with a 1950s theme. Adam tells his father that the Cold War ended peacefully when the Soviet Union fell. There was never an atomic war. Calvin, unimpressed, decides to construct a new fallout shelter as Eve observes and tinkers with her engagement ring.